you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we are back with our second guest of today, Miss Morgana, who is going to tell us about her life as a professional mermaid. It's so funny because when you think about it, when you're a child and people ask you, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? I know I think about things and I'm like, I would say I wanted to be a dancer. I would want to be a ballerina. I would want to be a mermaid, but never did I think that this was something that people can actually do. And so I'm super excited to bring Miss Morgana onto the screen right now because she's going to tell us exactly what it's like living life as a professional mermaid. Can you guys believe it? So let me go ahead and add her to the stream. Hi, Morgana. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for joining the show today. I have so many questions. I'm just so excited, so curious. And I just want you to go ahead and introduce yourself to viewers and tell us a little bit about your personal story and how you ended up as a professional mermaid.
Absolutely. So my name's Morgana, and I started out as a circus artist about 10 years ago. I started out as an aerialist, actually doing aerial dance. And from there, sort of expanded into fire and expanded into stilts and eventually expanded into mermaiding. And mermaiding rapidly became my life. It happened very, very quickly. It took off. I had just more requests for mermaid performers than I could physically even do myself, and way more than anything else. So I decided that if there was this much demand for mermaids, I better get some more mermaids. And I sort of collected and trained, and now I run a group called the Circus Siren Pod, which is a team of 19 professional mermaids that perform all over the country.
Wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. So my first question to you is, which I know people are wondering, is, as I stated earlier, growing up as a kid, did you ever see yourself doing something like this?
Oh, not at all. I actually grew up very afraid of the water. It's kind of a funny story because so many professional mermaids, they do have that like, oh, I saw Disney when I was little and I always wanted to be Ariel. I do not have that story. Like, it's beautiful and it's magical, but it's not me. No, I had a near drowning experience when I was very young, and I just never liked to put my head under the water ever since then. I went to school for engineering. I was on a military scholarship. I was supposed to go into the Army and be an engineer, and that was my career plan. And clearly it didn't go that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. So you were scheduled on the path to be an engineer, and now you're a professional mermaid.
Right.
I'm speechless. I don't even know what to say. I mean, what are some of the responses that you get when people ask you, Morgana, what is it that you do? And you tell them you're a professional mermaid. Are you met with people kind of like, what? What is
It's mostly disbelief. Yeah.
Right.
It's getting more popular. So there are people like, oh my God, I've never met like one of you before. And then they have 1,000 questions. But for the most part, people seem to think I'm joking.
Wow.
And they're like, oh no, what do you really do? And I'm like, no, I was serious about the mermaid thing. I'm way too serious about the mermaid thing.
Wow, that's incredible. So what exactly do you do? I know professional mermaid is kind of broad, so people are still wondering, okay, what does that look like? What do you do on a daily basis, every day? What do you have to do?
So I always tell people there are 1,000 ways to be a mermaid. Like, mermaid is a genre, not a specific necessary thing. It's kind of like engineer. There's a bunch of different types of engineers. It's a category. So what my team does, what I do, what my company is really known for is tank shows. We have 3 travel tanks. We travel around the country. We have hyper realistic mermaid tales, and we're doing dive shows. That's our main form of entertainment. We'll do some meet and greets and things like that as well. But then there's also mermaids who do birthday parties for small children. There's mermaids who do a lot of environmental educational thing. There's mermaids who focus more on modeling. So it really depends on like what kind of mermaid you want to be, what you do. But again, with us, it's all tanks and travel and these sort of large scale performances. We work with aquariums, casinos, large scale festivals. So as to my day to day, it's not as glamorous as you might think. I do a lot of planning, and the engineering degree does come in handy because when you're moving huge tanks of water, that takes a lot of planning and a lot of understanding the science. And sometimes a lot of on-site repair, being able to set them up and make sure they don't leak and everything, all your filters and pumps are going. So my day-to-day involves a lot more math, science, and engineering than I expected to be in mermaiding, but it's all the living for those hours where we get to perform.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And I love how you said that you're able to tie in some of the things you learned about engineering as well and incorporate it into your career. So, my question to you is, why do you think mermaiding, if that's the proper term,
That's the verb.
that's okay. I was like, mermaiding, is that right?
Yeah.
Mermaiding is so popular. Why do you think it attracts so many people? And it's like you said, kind of like blossomed into its own genre, its own career, and people can actually now apply to be a professional mermaid. What do you think it is about mermaids?
I think the really cool thing about mermaids is there's really no bounds on how to be a mermaid. There's every single culture in the world has some variety of a mermaid legend. So it's clearly something that just has fascinated humans for thousands of years. There's got to be something intrinsic about it that we love. But because of that, there's mermaid stories about mermaids that are 3 inches long. There's mermaid stories about mermaids the size of a great blue whale. There's every gender, race, size, you name it. There's sinister, dark, deadly mermaids. There's happy-go-lucky mermaids.
Wow.
And I think this is why it's so appealing, is whatever your personal image of what it means to be a mermaid is, that's an option. Wow. And it's really an endless sort of world of creativity.
I love that. So for you, what kind of keeps you motivated and going in this career? Because like you said, it's not always as glamorous, right? As people might imagine or think, like, wow, she's a mermaid. You know, she gets to travel and tour and do all of these shows. But what keeps you going? Because I know there are times where you're probably exhausted from all of the shows and doing things. So what do you use to keep yourself motivated and inspired?
For me, it's really my team that I've built. It's become so much more than I ever could have done by myself. And I'm so proud of them. And they're kind of what gets me up in the morning. I have 19 mermaids now, of various genders. We use the term mermaid the same way you would use the term, like, when you talk about cows having 4 stomachs, you don't mean you're not talking about bulls. It's just that's the term people generally use. So that includes the men. So I have 19 mermaids, and some of them were mermaid performers before I found them. Some of them I trained from the very first time they ever put on a tail, and watching them grow and wanting to give them opportunities and make their dreams come true has really become my focus and my motivation. There are days I don't want to get out of bed, but I want them to have work. I want them to keep improving. And because of that, like, I need to captain the ship. And I'm so proud of all of them.
Right. Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about doing this during COVID, because just a year ago, we were shut down. You know, I have a lot of friends who are in the arts and theater and entertainment industry, and boy, did they just share with me how hard it was for them to, you know, find a job. They missed performing, they missed going out, they missed being with cast members, and, you know, things of that nature. And COVID really took it took a hard hit on everybody, but I would say career rise and jobs, a lot of people in the arts and entertainment industry, they were able, you know, to fend for themselves. They basically had to go out and get regular jobs. So paint us the picture and walk us through what that was like.
I mean, I agree with you. I think arts and entertainment, we always joke within the industry that we were, it's a dark joke, that we were the first industry to shut down, and we will be the last one to open back up. Like, it is probably the industry that got hit the hardest, because there isn't even a way to do things part way, the way that the hospitality industry kind of has been able to, or the restaurant industry. We're just out. Right. And so we did what a lot of people did, which was to try to pivot to the internet, but that doesn't really work when we're used to crowds of 5,000 people. Like, that's our niche. That's the level that we perform at. And so you can't gather that many people, and you really can't even gather that many people on a live stream. Plus, our art form doesn't translate well to the internet. The whole point is that it's interactive, that you're experiencing meeting a mermaid. Like, that's the magic of the show. And that doesn't work on the internet, where you could also just, like, YouTube a mermaid video. Not the same experience. So we did a couple things to try to stay afloat, pun fully intended. We released a calendar, which was a first for us. We'd never tried to release merch of any variety. So we shot a full underwater calendar in one of our tanks and released that. That helped a lot. And then we created a Patreon for the people who wanted to kind of follow the mermaid journey and see more of the behind the scenes and get to kind of know the team as we are. And we focused that Patreon a little more towards the growing mermaid industry rather than just the general public. Like most of our performances are focused on the public. With COVID, we started focusing more on our industry, and a big part of that Patreon is now training up and coming mermaids who, people who want to get into mermaiding, people who have been mermaiding a little bit and want to take it pro. We've started putting out resources for people who are trying to make a career out of mermaiding.
Wow, that's incredible. I love how you guys have been able to kind of pivot and find a way to, keep going and be creative when, like I said, COVID basically didn't allow people to even breathe for the most part. So I think that's so inspiring. And so for people, there's unfortunately a lot of people out there who I've seen have been kind of critical. They may think like, oh, professional mermaiding, like sounds cool, sounds unique, or just even like circus entertainers or just, things of that nature. They think it sounds cool and unique, but they're like, is it a real, they don't consider it a real.
Is it a real job?
Right. Yeah. They consider it more like a gig, or it's not really essential or needed. So you, as someone who is a professional, mermaid, and someone who's also an entrepreneur, building your team, having your own company, what would you say to those critics?
So the first thing I tend to say, well, if they're the kind of person who has also built a $500,000 company before they were 30, I would be happy to listen to their critiques. But in all seriousness, I tend to remind them to just let people enjoy things. Not everything has to be curing cancer or advances in science. Like, it's great that those things exist, and it's great that there are incredible people working in those fields. But let people enjoy things. We all just spent the last year, binging shows on streaming services and listening to music. So you can't tell me for a second that the arts aren't important. The arts are all that kept us going for the last 13 months.
You're absolutely right.
This is the arts, and that escapism and that magic and that being able to believe even for a little bit in something bigger than yourself and something otherworldly, that has value. And at the end of the day, if people want to go see mermaids, let them go see mermaids.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I just feel like in today's society, we just live in a world where people are constantly nitpicking and critiquing each other. And like you said, people don't even realize it is the arts that keep us going. I can't tell you how many times I saw on social media people saying like, oh, I need a new, show to watch on Netflix. Anybody recommend me something, or discovering new music, or, going back outside, reading, just different things.
And people were lamenting, all these conventions have been shut down and all these events. And then they turn around in the same breath and say, oh, well, those events, we don't need them. They aren't essential. No, humans congregate. That's what we do. We're doing the right thing by not doing that right now. Right. But that doesn't mean that those things are superfluous.
Right. Absolutely. So my next question for you is, what would you say to maybe that 5-year-old girl, or that 13-year-old girl, or that 16-year-old girl when she's sitting down at home with her parents and they're talking, right? And let's go with the 16-year-old girl, and they're saying, college is coming up. You need to be prepared. There's things you want to do. And she looks at them and say, Mom and Dad, I don't want to go to college. I really have a passion and I want to be a professional mermaid. And her parents are freaking out because they're just like, what? Is this realistic? We want you to go to school. Or maybe she wants to go to school, but she still wants to be a professional mermaid and she doesn't know exactly how to go about that. What advice would you offer to her? Or for people who that's something they want to pursue, but they almost are push towards not doing it, not pursuing it because they're afraid of the backlash, right? That's going to come from society or family and friends.
So I think overall our parents, for the most part, not everyone's parents, but for the most part, parents mean well. And I think that a lot of times when parents discourage their children from going into the arts, what they want for their child is stability. And they know that artistic fields don't have that stability. And that's why they push for, college or business school or something like that. And I understand where they're coming from. but it isn't for everyone. I mean, again, I had a scholarship for the military. I was going for engineering, and I know for a fact I would have been miserable.
Wow.
So there's the recognizing that's not for everyone. And then on the flip side, education is important, but that education doesn't have to come in a classroom. The field of mermaiding is growing so fast and so huge. And there are so many resources now that weren't available 10 years ago. When I started mermaiding, there weren't tutorials on YouTube, there weren't conventions, there weren't classes you could take, there weren't certifications. I mean, I've been doing this longer than most tail makers have been in business. Wow. Like there was nothing when we started out. And now there's conventions, there's certifications, there's whole career paths that you can make out of mermaiding. So doing the research and then getting the education to go alongside it, if you're worried about the financial viability of supporting yourself on mermaiding, put it right next to becoming a dive master, and then work at a dive shop where you can also do mermaiding and marry those two things together so that you have a little more versatility and a little more financial security that way, because you have an education that can be used in various ways, even if mermaiding is what you ultimately want to do with it. And the big thing I tell people is to come to Mermagicon. Mermagicon is a mermaid convention. It's the largest mermaid convention in the world. It happens in the Washington, D.C. area in Manassas, Virginia every year. Normally it's in like February, but COVID. So right now it's rescheduled for August, and hopefully by then it's safe, or they'll cancel, or who knows. But Mermagicon has classes for everyone from very beginner, has never put on a fin in their life, to super professional and does this for a living. It's got professional mermaids from all over the world. It's got business classes. It's got tax experts, marketing experts. Like, it's just, if you want to make a career out of it, like Mermagicon is the place to be.
Wow, that sounds, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. And
I'm so jealous of the new generation of mermaids because I don't have any of that.
I bet. So what are some of the things that you would recommend in terms of for people to kind of educate themselves about becoming a mermaid, or even people who maybe they don't want to necessarily be a mermaid, but they're just curious to learn more about like what you do and what, the purpose of mermaids are in general. So do you have any resources where people can go, any websites or books or just anything that you'd recommend?
I mean, shameless self-plug, I definitely recommend our Patreon. We post a lot of behind the scenes stuff. We post a lot of business information at various levels. And we also run a monthly AMA session where people who just are interested can come on and ask us anything they want. And we'll be pretty honest with you on those sessions. Yeah, they're a lot of fun. And following mermaids on social media is very hit or miss, because some of them are a little more on the business side and will be a little more transparent about that business. Some of them, their social media is for the character they created. So you can sort of glean information by how they're doing it. But the important thing is that you don't have to create your career path in mermaiding anything like anyone else's career path. So there's videos on YouTube, which I don't necessarily recommend, because learning anything in water from YouTube is not your best plan. But you can also seek out classes at your local pools. There's mermaid classes. NAUI is putting out a mermaid certification. There's training you can actually go get from professionals, from people who have been through this. And overall, I would just spend some time asking what it is you want to do in mermaiding, because again, it's a wide world. If you want to be a model, there's a different set of skills you're going to want for that than if you want to be a live performer, than if you want to make coloring books.
Wow. That's awesome. That's incredible. So let's talk a little bit about like the training and then actually like putting on that mermaid shell. Because I'm sure it's a question that comes up a lot for you. A lot of people are asking like, how heavy is it? What's that's like? So can you share a little bit about, the training that goes into as a mermaid, how much time you spend in the water, all of that good stuff, and then about fitting that tail?
Absolutely. So mermaiding at the level that we do it, and again, there's different ways to do it. You can be a purely land mermaid if you want, but the way that we do it and what's made my company so interesting is that we're tank divers. That's really our specialty. So with that comes the biggest skill we have, other than just learning to move and swim as a mermaid, and the physical training that goes into that, is the breath hold training. We're certified free divers. My elite team can hold their breath for over 3 minutes at a time. Wow. And that takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice. And it's something that it's one of those, if you don't use it, you kind of lose its skills. So you have to keep up on that. And the hardest part about doing what we do is just that it's an extremely physically demanding job, and you have to be very physically robust. And that's not just necessarily musculature and the strength of working in the tail, but also having your eyes open in water. If you have sensitive eyes, there's not a whole lot to be done about that.
Right.
And so there's difficulties there. So it's definitely a physically demanding art because of all the being in water and dragging around the tail, which we'll talk about. And it's a mentally demanding art because you have to be underwater, be holding your breath, be in a position that your body does not want to be in. Every survival instinct in your brain is firing. Your legs are tied together. You basically have weights on, not real weights, but the tail.
Right.
You're underwater, you can't see, and you can barely hear. And that is a position your brain does not want your body to be in. And then while you're down there and can't even see the audience you're performing for, you're trying to be natural and make them believe that you can see them and have those interactions while you're basically performing deaf and blind.
Wow.
So it's one of the harder art forms I've ever done, and I've swung from ceilings by my ankles. Yeah. So as far as the tails go, tails vary. If you are starting out, do not get a silicone tail. I cannot harp on that hard enough. Get a nice fabric tail from Fin Fun and start practicing in that, because how you swim in a tail is not at all intuitive. Somebody should show you.
Wow.
The tails that we work in silicone tails. You can have fabric tails, you can have hybrid tails, like tails that have scales sewn on them, or you can have silicone tails. And silicone tails tend to be the most realistic, and they are very customizable. You can have them painted however you want. You can have different flukes, different shapes, but they are very heavy. I've had tails that weighed 20 pounds. I've had tails that weighed more like 50 pounds.
Wow.
So silicone's a very dense, heavy material, and the amount of silicone that goes into that tail, it gets heavy fast.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it is definitely a workout. And then those tails are very expensive, and part of that is because for them to fit you properly and look realistic, they are custom made to your body. So you're not only laying out the financial commitment of several $1,000s buying this tail, but you're also kind of committing to keeping more or less the same shape for as long as you want to be wearing that tail, because it doesn't have a zipper, it doesn't have laces, it is what it is, and you can only fit it for as long as you can fit it. So it's they're very thick typically, and silicone sticks to skin, which is a great general feature, but makes putting the tail on. I always tell people there is nothing beautiful or magical about putting on a mermaid tail. Like, there is no pretty part of this process. It is a lot of grunting, a lot of wiggling around. You're normally laying on the ground to do it because of the size of the tail. There's been situations we've gotten in where somebody's having a bit of a struggle. Sometimes you just have a rough day getting in your tail, where one of the other teammates have needed to put like a lubricant on their hand and arm and reach down that tail for their friend and help get the foot straps on the heels or whatever needs to be done. We've had to shake mermaids into tails where they're standing up and we've picked them up by the tail in order to shake them in the way that you do like a pillow into a pillowcase. It is not a pretty process. Yeah, there's nothing magical about that part of the game at all.
I can only imagine. That's why, like I said, I've always, seen the videos or seen pictures, and I'm just like, what is it like to, put on that tail? I can't even imagine.
Every time we have a news crew, they're like, "Oh, can I film you putting it on?" I'm like, "No." Nobody needs to see this. It's not gonna be good.
Oh man. So is there any kind of extra like physical activities that you guys do? Is there like a lot of cardio do you guys do strength training or lifting weights? I'm just curious, just to be able to,
do what we do.
That. Yeah, do what you do.
So cross training is pretty important, and all of us do cross train one way or another. I guess not surprising given the origins of the company, but a large number of us actually are circus acrobats of one variety or another, typically aerialists. So aerial is great fitness training in general. If you're looking for a new fitness regime, find an aerial studio near you. And it trains a lot of the back muscles, a lot of the arms and shoulders, a lot of the core, because the other thing that we have to do, being mostly tank performers, is be able to lift ourselves out of that tank while still in a tail that is now full of water by our arms.
Wow.
So pull-ups and things like that become very important because you need to be able to lift that extra 60 pounds plus your body weight. That works out really well. Swimming, just general swimming, just without a tail, just overall that cardio and getting to move in the water and be comfortable with the water.
Right.
Free diving for breath holding and cardiovascular training. Running is always really good. But for the most part, all our cross training tends to fit with our individual interests. Like we have a couple of the mermaids that are avid hikers. Some of them are total gym rats that just want to lift weights all day. And it's just about maintaining an overall level of fitness and physical robustness, no matter what that looks like for you.
Wow. So what inspired you or kind of piqued your interest about, like you said, aerial training and kind of getting into the circus arts of things?
Mm-hmm. Well, when I was real little, probably about 10, I saw an aerialist on a PBS broadcast. It was a male aerialist, and he was doing silks, and silks were red. I remember this moment very vividly. And I loved it. It was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. And from that point on, I really wanted to be, my childhood dream, such as it were, was to be an aerialist on a cruise ship. I thought that sounded like a lot of fun, like travel the world, get to perform. Yeah. That'll be great. By high school, when like sort of the reality of you've got to figure out how you're going to support yourself starts to set in, we got back on the engineering and the military career. But I think that never really went away, that interest. So when I got to college and there was a pole dance studio, I was like, okay, there weren't any aerial dance studios at the time, but pole dance is actually very close and very, very closely related. So I started with that and loved it. I mean, I absolutely loved pole. It is still my first love. Like, it's my baby. Wow. And I competed as a pole dancer and performed as a pole dancer for years, for events and what have you. And that's how I got into the aerial dance. I finally then ended up at a studio that had silks and hoop in addition to pole, and was like, well, let's try this one now.
Right.
And yeah, by 2014, I was a freelance aerial dancer.
Wow. That's incredible. I can't even imagine. I was very shocked because I didn't even know you could compete for pole.
Oh, yeah.
Pole
is another industry, like, not to get off topic, but pole dance is another industry that is just getting bigger and bigger. Wow. People always think adult entertainment when they think pole, and that is where it comes from. Right. But or at least where modern pole comes from. But there is an entire sport around it now. Like, there's competitions, conventions. I did circus inspired pole, so I was performing for theater productions and corporate events and things like that. So it's not, if you were curious.
Yes, no, I was. That's why I asked, because I was just like, I didn't even know it was considered honestly a sport at all. So that's amazing. So
it's under consideration for the Olympics.
Really?
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. That sounds like another thing I'm going to follow up on.
We can talk about that sometime if you like.
That'll be part 2 of the interview. So thank you for sharing that. So do you see, in terms of, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, do you see the mermaid industry growing and getting bigger and bigger? Because I know a lot of people are like, is this kind of one of those trends? Like, maybe 20, 30 years from now, people say, remember when being a professional mermaid was a trend and everybody was doing it? Do you actually think it's projected to grow and get bigger? Or do you kind of think this is like a little trend that's growing and, maybe it'll last, it won't? What are your thoughts about that?
So I always tell people that it's certainly a trend, but it's not a trend like Twilight was a trend. It's a trend like iPhones are a trend. Like, yes, it is something that is growing now, but it's growing now specifically because we now have the equipment to do it in a way that we didn't before. Those silicone tails that have become kind of the standard for professional mermaiding, those didn't exist till about 8 years ago, more or less. The material didn't exist. So I think a lot of the growth of the industry has to do with accessibility. I mean, again, if you look at human history, we've been obsessed with mermaids in every corner of the globe since the dawn of time.
Yes.
So the interest, I don't think, is going to wane at all. It may wax and wane the way that circus has waxed and waned, the way that all kinds of other entertainment forms sort of grow and die. Baseball used to be bigger, but now football's bigger. Like, sure, there might be some general industry variation, but overall, no, I think it's definitely going to continue to grow, especially given current trends. I think about 2 years ago, it was that mermaiding as an industry became a $500 million industry. and that's billion with a B. Like there are people working as professional mermaids all over the world. There are companies that all they do is make tails. There are certifications for mermaiding from a couple different certification houses. There are vacations that are focused around mermaiding. There's modeling opportunities. Like this is not getting smaller at all. If anything, it's expanding into bigger and bigger regions.
That's awesome. That's simply awesome. So for you, in terms of 5, 10, 15 years from now, where do you see yourself, Morgana? What are your hopes and vision for the future?
Well, the problem is that until things get signed in about 3 weeks, I cannot tell you, but it is going to be big. It's going to be, how does one phrase this with the NDA? It is going to be the kind of thing where suddenly mermaiding and my company and what we do will be available not just to the people who come see us live, but to anyone, anywhere. And we have definitely expanded over the past year, despite COVID. While we didn't work during COVID because it wasn't safe, we've taken that time to work with new clients and to work through new media avenues. And there's going to be a lot coming. The biggest thing that I can share with you guys is that the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair we're right now in the process of building out a permanent venue there. So it'll be a custom tank, a custom venue, and which will make it the first mermaid purpose-built show venue in the state of Pennsylvania.
Oh my God.
So that's very exciting. And it's definitely going to continue to grow. And hopefully in a couple of months, I can be less coy.
Right, for sure. It's a bit of a teaser, so it definitely sounds like we're going to have you back on the show to tell us.
I would love that.
Time is right, about that, because it sounds super exciting and intriguing.
I'm very exciting. For me, we are hopefully on the precipice of something I've been working towards for about 3 years. So I'm very excited. I just keep, checking my email and checking the phone for the call that says, full speed ahead.
Right. So I definitely want to go ahead and extend my congratulations for that. Whatever it is. Like I said,
thank you so much.
Finding out down the line. So for you, in terms of purpose, how do you define and how would you narrow down your purpose as a professional mermaid?
So for me personally, it's a little different than most, I think. I think that people who get into performance in general, or in fantasy performance in particular, the overall purpose is it's about transporting your audience to something else. It's about opening their minds to something other than their day-to-day.
Right.
And a lot of mermaids really enjoy that with performing for children. They love getting children to believe in the magic and to believe that this is a dream come true in front of them. And that's great. It's not what does it for me though. For me, I love performing for adults. I really, really do. Like I said, most of our clients are large events, corporate events, casinos. We do a lot of events that don't even have children. I love performing for adults because for me, the magic is in getting an adult to believe in possibilities again. And which is not to say that they're, in any way unaware that I am a human person in a costume doing a performance. Like they're 40, they know what's up. But it's the same reaction you're having. It's that, wait, I'm sorry, you grew up to be a professional mermaid? and it's that belief in magic, that belief of like, no, your wild dreams actually might be doable because somebody actually did grow up to be a mermaid.
Right.
And I like having that reintroduction of imagination and possibility to people's lives.
Right. And I think that's so important because, if I'm just thinking about like Peter Pan in Neverland, right? When you think back to being a kid and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I would love for a place like Neverland to exist where you never grow up or you return, right? You get to just in this fantasy world where all your dreams and all of the cool things that you wish. There's mermaids and Peter Pan, right?
There are.
Super excited to see. So, thinking about that. And then as an adult, especially in America, we're so focused and busy on just, work, being serious, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? Trying to get to the next level in life. But a lot of the times we don't just stop and take moments, to just kind of relax and just go to this world where we can relax and, and, just really not necessarily forget about all of the issues, you know, the important issues and things happening in society and our personal problems, but, you know, just kind of take a moment and a step away from that and just go back. And I love that you guys are able to provide that. And that's what does it for you, you know, for adults. Because and adults, we're worried about this bill we have coming up. We got to take the kids here. You know, what am I going to do when I retire? Right. Just all of those things. And it would be so nice if people could just, you know, just like when they travel to a new different, you know, a different country and just explore their very own fantasies or go back to those childhood dreams where they're like, I wonder what it would be like, right, to be a professional mermaid or to be, you know, in the presence of one. Are there male mermaids?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have some on the team. So individually, they're mermen. Collectively, the industry and everything is still referred to with the term mermaid or mermaids or mermaiding. Individually, they tend to be referred to as mermen, and they're wonderful. I mean, there's several in the community. There's some that are very high profile. We have mermen that work for us, and they're great in shows because, again, it sort of breaks a barrier. People have a very preconceived notion of what mermaids look like, and to be fair, the fact that I fit that mold is one of the things that helped me get started, for sure. But I've built in a lot of representation and a lot of inclusion to my team because, again, it's important to me that people understand that anyone can be a mermaid.
Right. Absolutely.
And anytime I get the opportunity to break out the male performers, it has an incredible effect of, again, giving people that belief again that you actually can grow up to be anything. And here's, you know, a man who became a mermaid.
Right, right. Do you have any special stories or anything, moments that you can share with us from some of, you know, some of your audience or people coming up to you and be like, Morgan, I love the show, or I love this, or any questions that you want to share with me?
One of my favorite performances like that, where it was just being able to have an effect on someone, was we did an event a couple of years ago for the Aquarium of Niagara in Niagara Falls. And to be fair, it did not go to plan. You can plan for everything, and sometimes things don't work. In this case, they had the pool we were supposed to perform in, they were unable to heat. And 50 degrees is very cold in water. So we were able to dive some of the smaller tanks, but mostly instead of doing a dive show, we ended up doing a lot of hours of meet and greet. And the reason it was hours was because people had come from both the US side and the Canadian side, and we had over 3,000 people show up. There was a line around the building. We were larger than the building's capacity. And we didn't want anyone to be turned away disappointed. So we set up best we could, and we did, you know, mermaid meet and greets, and you know, they at least kids got to, you know, come touch the tail and ask us questions. And all of my performers are very good at improv. They're very good at sort of getting a shy child to feel very comfortable. But one of the performers, Katya, she had this little boy who had waited in this line for like an hour. Like, these people waited long. We felt so bad, but there were things beyond our control. And this little boy finally gets up to Katya, and he's maybe 4. And he gets up next to her, and he's eyes big as saucers, looking at her, and she's like, oh, you know, and what's your name? And he's just, not a word is coming out of this child's mouth. He's clearly so flabbergasted and shy. And she's doing the well, do you want to touch my fin, you know, and see what it feels? And nothing from this kid at all, just in total shock. And so she's like, okay, well, you know, let's look at mommy. Let's, you know, take the picture. Okay, bye. You know, because this kid just hasn't gotten a word out the whole time. And he leaves. And like I said, the venue's super crowded. Right. The line goes on. And suddenly Katya realizes there's motion off to her left. And this little boy has fought sort of back through the crowd on the side and comes up to her and hands her a rock and goes, this is for you. And Katya still has that rock to this day. It is in a very special place in her mermaid grotto. And it's so sweet, but it kills me. So the stories like that are really the best for us as the kids. There are kids that more or less adopt us. We get presents from children all the time. And I had a similar situation at a Ren Fair once with a girl who we always explain to children that we can dry out and get legs because that preserves the magic. She was so excited to see me out of the tank. She kept tackle hugging me And I swear the 6-year-old almost took me off my feet. I had to sit down just so that I wasn't going to like fall over. So anytime we have that really special connection with a child or a patron is a really good day.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can only imagine stories like that. And like I'm saying, I'm just thinking back to my childhood right now. And I'm like, man, I'm sure, right? If you would have been a mermaid back then or someone, I would have loved and just, been mesmerized by the experience of having a professional mermaid in front of me. Maybe one day it would be so amazing if they had like some kind of like a Disney World, but for mermaids, right?
Right.
Like some kind of awesome amusement kind of water theme park, I think would be.
We're actually going to be, this year, we're doing a residency at a water park called Aquatopia, which amusingly is also in Pennsylvania. And they are an indoor water park, and they will have our mermaids at their park for all of July and August.
Oh, wow. Great. Thank you.
Well, that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That is perfect. So I'm sure viewers, anybody who has kids, anybody, just any adults, that'd be that'd be a fun girls trip, I'm thinking, to go there as well. So yeah, well, Morgana, thank you so much for coming on the show today. You were incredible, and we really enjoyed learning about professional mermaids, and I look forward to having you on the show again as well, because we definitely want to hear that big announcement that
yes, I will let you know as soon as. Hopefully, it's only supposed to be a couple more weeks. From what I'm told, everything is agreed to. They just have to sign stuff. But
right, of course.
But yeah, so hopefully it'll only be a couple more weeks, but I would love to be back with you guys again.
All right, perfect. And so the final thing is just go ahead and share your website and social media. Anybody who may have questions for you after the interview, where they can go and find you and reach out to you.
So the website is Circus Siren Pod. I always tell people it's Circus like Barnum and Bailey, Siren like the thing that lures you to your death, and pod like a pod of dolphins. And we have some photos and information up there. That's where you can find the calendar. I know it's March, but if anybody would like some pretty beautiful high art photos of mermaids, we do have the calendar up there. The best place to follow us, though, is our Facebook. We have Facebook is Circus Siren Pod. We're on Instagram and TikTok. It's Circus Siren Pod across all 3 platforms. I will say our TikTok's pretty lit, but but we will post our shows and things in our upcoming season on Facebook as things confirm. Right now, it looks like, if all goes well, hopefully we will be back performing for kids and adults alike by July and August.
Oh, awesome. Hey, that sounds great. We'll definitely be looking forward to that. And please let me know if you guys ever do something in Dallas. We would be so...
I have been to Texas before for mermaid work. So next time I'm down there, yes, I did back in 2016.
Please let me know if you happen to, as things open back up, be in Dallas. Love to meet you in person and come to a show and, learn more about you guys. So thank you so much, Morgana, for coming on to the show. I enjoyed you, and you and I will talk soon.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you.